Very good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to the many viewers attending this satsang online. Oh, yeah. So I didn't get completely ready here. We're back to our prior format. For our online viewers, somebody noticed that you haven't seen our local student body lately. And the reason was we shifted our satsang, our local satsang, to 6 p.m. So we had online satsang at 11 a.m. and local satsang at 6 p.m. Now we're back to our original. Is it working? Yeah. We're back to our original schedule. So we will, as before, we will alternate between questions from our local audience, our ashram students, and alternate with questions from online viewers. And the online questions, again, are just, I don't know why, I'm really impressed by the quality of the questions. It's easy to ask kind of, I won't say silly questions, but questions that are kind of off the point. And these questions are not at all off the point. They're very much to the point. So I will address I may not get to them all. I'll do what I can. I'll address as many as I can. We'll also take some questions from local students. The first question here, let me just check to make sure we're okay. That looks okay. Looks okay. All right. So first question is from Deepshika, who lives in Mumbai. She's an excellent question. Look at this. Deepshika asks, I understand that for a mumukshu, spiritual practice must be the only goal in life. Correct. However, what about an individual with a family? Good. When a spouse's goal is physical intimacy, while the spiritual seeker wants to practice celibacy. Well, practicing celibacy is an important practice for sannyasis, for brahmacharis. It's not a spiritual practice for a householder. So as a householder, Deepshika can be with her husband without interrupting her spiritual practice at all. It's not an obstacle. What about when the children want to go shopping and the spiritual seeker wants to practice meditation? Good. Well, do both. Meditate first. It'll help you cope with the shopping better. Meditate first, and then when you take your children shopping, this is where karma yoga is so important. Spiritual shopping becomes sadhana when you master the practice of karma yoga. So you finish your meditation, but your sadhana doesn't come to an end. You take your children to go shopping, you go to the mall, and that can, in taking your children to the mall, your spiritual practice continues. If you practice karma yoga, you have to learn properly karma yoga. A nice video I did recently called The Secret of Karma Yoga. If you haven't watched that yet, I suggest it. Next part, typical problems everyone faces. What about the in-laws? Expect you to participate in rituals based on superstitions, but the spiritual seeker wants to engage in introspection. Good. First of all, those rituals are not based on superstition. The rituals are based on the scriptures. The same scriptures that teach you Vedanta are the same scriptures that teach these rituals. So the rituals are not to be avoided. The rituals, understood properly, are a form of prayer. Therefore, in participating in rituals is another kind of sadhana, no conflict. So, should one give in to these expectations by calling it dharma? It's not giving in. Karma yoga transforms all these activities into spiritual practice so that you lose nothing. Karma yoga is the key. It's so important that at least a third of the Bhagavad Gita is devoted to this topic for a very good reason, as we see here. Rejection of such expectations leads to conflict, and that seems to go against dharma, correct. So if you have a family, if you have family responsibilities, you do indeed have a dharmic responsibility to fulfill normal expectations, appropriate or dharmic expectations. But the key is to learn and master karma yoga so that all of these activities contribute to your spiritual growth. Therefore, and in that way, there'll be no conflict for you for addressing Deepshika. So no doubt, Deepshika feels conflicted about her spiritual practice versus her family activities, and karma yoga will eliminate that division and the conflict that Deepshika herself feels. Okay, good question. Next, from Shaku, who lives in Texas. Her question, what do Vedanta's teachings say about abortion for non-medical reasons? When does the life force, prana, become part of the unborn child? Okay, the child is according to the doctrine of karma, the child is invested with the subtle body, sukshma sharira, which includes prana, invested from the point of conception. So there's no question about that, same as our Christian friends feel that the embryo is sacred, is a divinity living in the mother's womb. That we can absolutely accept. What do Vedanta's teachings say about abortion for obviously abortion for non-medical reasons is something else, although we have to address that, a little complicated. Vedanta itself doesn't say anything about abortion, but we can approach this question from a standpoint of dharma, according to Hindu dharma. What is the position of Hindu dharma on abortion in general, and in particular abortion for non-medical reasons? The basic principle of dharma, as we've discussed many times before, is ahimsa, which means take the path of least harm. Obviously, taking the life of an unborn child is harm, but, always a but, they're not exceptions. There are no exceptions to the principle of least harm. But there are exceptions in the sense that there are unique situations in which taking the life of the unborn child causes less harm than the alternatives. Usually that's not the case. But in unusual situations, it might be the case. For example, and Shaku mentioned this, medical abortions. Suppose if carrying the baby full term threatens mother's life. That's a very obvious example where taking the baby's life causes less harm than the alternative. Mother will suffer tremendously. The unborn baby doesn't suffer at all. No conscious alertness yet for that unborn child. So the baby won't suffer. Mother will suffer terribly. There are other situations. first of all, the general principle here is where it's possible for mother to deliver the child, and if it's an unwanted child, to give the child up for adoption would be perhaps the best alternative. That way mother doesn't face the challenges of raising an unwanted child, and the child has the opportunity to live a normal life being adopted. But there are some situations where adoption is not possible. For example, if you're in a village in India, or worse, a village in Afghanistan, imagine a girl gets pregnant. In a village in India or a village in Afghanistan, it's a unique situation because adoption is not an option in either case, not even remotely an option. So if for this girl, and I'm talking girl, a girl who gives birth to a child in those situations, it might create so much pain and suffering for the girl, it destroys her life. If that happens to be the case, perhaps, and there's no general rule here, perhaps a non-medical abortion in that unique case might be preferable. Notice I'm kind of softening my words here. We can't make a general conclusion. The principle is if not aborting the embryo causes more harm, causes an extraordinary amount of harm, then perhaps abortion is dharmic and acceptable in those unique situations, in those unusual situations. All right, next from Prashanto, who lives in Bangladesh. Prashanto asks, I have noticed one thing in common, that almost every enlightened master emphasizes living in the present moment. Even Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, act without thinking of the results, dismissing the significance of the future. My question is, what is Advaita Vedanta's viewpoint on living in the present moment? Okay, enlightened masters would include famous teachers like Sadhguru, would include this. Eckhart Tolle is famous actually for this particular teaching. Whether or not they are enlightened masters or not, I'll let you make your own conclusion. Sri Krishna does not teach living in the present moment. That to act without thinking about results. In fact, Sri Krishna teaches again and again to act considering the consequences of your result, but to act knowing that the results are given by Ishvara, karma paladatta, and not by you. Karma nyeva adhikaraste, ma paleshu kadachana. This famous verse is often misunderstood. It doesn't say to act without thinking about the results. It does say to act not for the sake of the results. In fact, it doesn't even say that. It says to act knowing that you don't produce the result. Te adhikaraha nasti. You have no authority over the phala. You have authority over the karma, karmani eva. You have authority or choice over the actions you commit. You have no authority or control over the results. Therefore, you should understand that Ishvara is karma paladatta, the giver of the fruits of action. The whole doctrine of karma, as we just discussed, is being alert to the results or consequences of your actions. For example, and I know this isn't what Prashanto is suggesting, but suppose someone says, I'm only going to be concerned about what's happening in the present moment, so if I hurt you and you suffer, if I do something that causes you to suffer in the future, it's okay. How's that? I'll send you a nasty letter, and you won't read this letter for several days. So the hurt will be caused in the future. In the present moment, I'm just focused on the present moment. You can see the defect in that thinking. So Vedanta does not stress this idea of living in the present moment because it suggests not being alert to the consequences of our action in the future. Dharma, following Dharma, living a life of Dharma absolutely requires that we have to consider the consequences of our actions which take place in the future. Living in the present moment is actually, it's a lovely meditation practice. Excellent as a meditation practice. To just be in the present moment in meditation is a great practice, but it's not a formula for living your life. And the fact that some so-called enlightened masters say that you should, if anyone says you should live in the present moment and you shouldn't be worried about the consequences of your actions in the future, anyone who says that you shouldn't be worried about future consequences, I don't think such a person would be qualified to be called an enlightened master. Okay, we'll take one more here. There's a question from Cody. It doesn't say where he lives. Cody asks, Nirguna Brahman, Brahman without attributes, and Saguna Brahman, Brahman with attributes, Ishvara, are these two the same thing? If they're the same, how can Brahman have attributes and no attributes? These technical terms, if we're going to use terms like Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman, they have to be understood properly. These are highly technical words, but they can be understood very simply. How about this? This. Okay. This pot is clay with attributes, right? That's not so complicated. This pot is clay with attributes. Clay is without attributes. Clay has no attributes. Clay has no potness. How's that? Clay has no potness. This pot has attributes, potness. So in this metaphor, clay represents Nirguna Brahman, pot represents Saguna Brahman. Am I holding two things in my hand? One thing. One thing, two perspectives. One reality, two perspectives is the simplest and most clear way. So just this pot metaphor, we use it so often in Advaita Vedanta because it's so helpful, and it certainly is helpful in this situation. Okay, do we have any questions here? A question in back, you'll need the microphone. And then
Namaste, Swamiji. I'm brought up in India, so, having that, doing idol worship from the start, it helps, to ingrain in me the Ishvara Bhav, right? But when it comes to me teaching my kids about, the Ishvara Bhav and staying in there, being brought up in America where it's not very, it's difficult to visualize it too much. Like it at home, we do things, they see it, but not going to temples that regularly as we could. We could see it everywhere. How do I teach my kids, like, what is Ishwar? What is Bhagwan? I understand now when I learn from you that it's not someone sitting up, a person who's,
Right.
you know,
Right.
we are not puppets in
Right.
their hand.
Right.
But it gets difficult for me to actually translate to my kids.
Good. Okay, so the question has to do with how to teach children in general and how to teach religion to children in particular. This teaching that Ishvara is not a being in a different loka, that's a teaching for adults. That's not a teaching meant for children. Do you teach little children algebra? Subject matters have to be suitable according to a child's age. You know this very well, but that applies not just to math, it applies to religion as well. So for young children, then Ishvara it's on our altar. We pray to Ishvara present on our altar, or we go to the temple. We pray to Ishvara at the temple. For young children, this is how children should be taught. When children are no longer young, when they're teenagers, by the way, teenagers in the US starts when they're about 9. That's just the culture. They grow up so fast. Anyway, when the children's attitudes begin to change, then sometimes it doesn't work to make children sit down in front of your family altar. Sometimes children become resistant to going to the temple. When and if that happens, the best thing for the parents to do is to model the behavior they want their children to follow when they become adults. So even if the children, older children, 9-year-old teenagers, even if they don't accompany mom and dad to the temple, they see mom and dad going to the temple. And the message is, this is important. It may not be important to the 9-year-old. It certainly is not important at all to the 15-year-old. Tell me, most of you, when you were 15, were you really eager to go to a temple? You know, it's an age of minimum interest in religious things, and that's just natural. I think that's true for the vast majority of people. So for that 15-year-old, again, teach by example. When mom and dad continue doing some prayers at home, they light a diya and some agarbatti at an altar. When mom and dad continue to go to the temple, and when mom and dad celebrate all the festivals, even if especially 15-year-olds, even when they don't participate, the example of the parents is more powerful than any other teaching. Far more powerful than what mom and dad say. What mom and dad say means less and less as children get older. But what mom and dad do counts for a lot. Okay, any follow-up on that question?
So it's a very good point. I'll keep that in mind. But another thing is, my daughter would ask me many a times, who is God? I don't see anything. How, the laws of karma.
Yeah.
I struggle sometimes to explain to her, what exactly is God? It's not just an idol.
How old the child is?
Now she's 15.
Okay, so at 15, a child has an ability to use reasoning.
Yes.
So then you can present a rational explanation of Ishvara, but a rational explanation not with all the details of Vedanta that you hear at our ashram, but a rational explanation that's suitable for a 15-year-old. What would that be? Ishvara is a reality because of which everything exists. Just like clay is present in the pot, Ishvara is manifest as the entire universe. Now, a 15-year-old won't appreciate it fully, but it is a solid, rational explanation. And teenagers are allergic to arbitrary explanations, right? For example, if an arbitrary explanation would be, mom says, it's like this. And the child says, why? And mom says, because I said so. Oh, forget it. That is the worst possible answer, because the child wants some rational, a teenager wants some solid rational basis for whatever they're being told. So to give a solid rational explanation about Ishvara to a child, even as you mentioned karma. Ishvara is not only the stuff of the universe, Ishvara is the intelligence of the universe. Ishvara's intelligence causes the planets to go around the sun. Nice. Ishvara's intelligence ensures that you get the results of actions that you did. 15-year-olds can understand this. 9-year-olds can't, generally. What to speak of 5-year-olds. So the point is that whatever teachings, whatever you teach your children has to be age appropriate. And that's true for anything, not just religion.
Thank you so much.
Okay, good. Any other questions here? Okay, let's take some more online. We got a bunch. Good questions. This question is from Ganesh. He doesn't say where he lives. Okay. How should I understand the apparent contradiction? Ishvara is a dependent reality, depends on Nirguna Brahman. Ishvara is a dream, and taking that statement, which looks like it's contradictory with Ishvara, is a dream of Nirguna Brahman. Well, it's contradictory because we never who said that Ishvara is a dream of Brahman? That's nothing you've ever heard here from me. Ishvara is not a dream. The world is not a dream. This dream is a metaphor that we sometimes use, in fact, often use. The dream metaphor is extremely useful, but it's a metaphor. Don't confuse the metaphor with the thing that's being represented. When we say the world is like a dream, what we mean is the world is not absolutely real. Vedanta, properly understood, Vedanta never, ever says that the world is a dream or the world is an illusion. These may be used as metaphors, but what is taught is that the dream, like a dream or an illusion, is experienced, but it's not absolutely real. In the same way, this world is experienced, but it's not absolutely real. The same goes for Ishvara. Ishvara, we say, is dependent on Brahman for its reality. But just because it's dependent on Brahman for its reality doesn't mean it's a dream or non-existent. Back to our common metaphor. Pot depends on clay for its existence. Therefore, pot is a dream? Pot is an illusion? No. Definitely it's true that pot is less real than clay. Pot comes and goes, clay remains. So absolutely, we say pot is less real, but pot is not a dream, pot is not an illusion. So just as the pot depends on clay for its existence, but it's not a dream or illusion, in the same way, Ishvara depends on Nirguna Brahman for its existence, but Ishvara is not a dream. Ishvara is not an illusion. Ishvara is as real as you and me and the world. That's what's properly taught in Advaita Vedanta. Next question from Crystal. Crystal doesn't say where she lives. Question, is there an equivalent to the Christian belief of Jesus dying for the sins of humanity, is there an equivalent teaching in Advaita Vedanta or the Vedas? This is a uniquely Christian idea that Jesus died for your sins. And it's actually the central teaching of Christianity. This is the basis of all Christian teachings, and that is, your sins are so, I don't want to misrepresent Christianity. In order to remove the sins of countless people, going to require a massive kind of expiation to earn the forgiveness for the sins of all mankind. For this reason, the only possible way of earning that forgiveness is for God himself to sacrifice himself. This is Christian theology. There is nothing at all like it in the Hindu tradition, just in a fundamental sense. Christians have the basic conclusion that mankind is sinful by nature, therefore is in dire need of salvation, but that concept is completely foreign to Hinduism. Hinduism has it that man is inherently divine by nature, not sinful by nature, divine by nature. Unfortunately, divine beings do some really stupid things due to ignorance. So what is considered sin, as Christians consider sin to be the cause for, let me say the other way around. The basic evil nature of humans causes sinful behavior, but for Hindus, there's no evil nature. There is divine nature, the opposite, but divine beings can still sin, but not due to evil, due to wrong thinking, due to ignorance. So no comparison. This question is from Sushama, who also lives in Mumbai. I read someplace that a good laugh is as good as a prayer. Did you ever laugh at a dirty joke? I'm not sure that's completely true. That there are some so-called off-color jokes that can elicit lots of laughs. I don't think we would consider them prayers. But Sushma says, I believe that laughing has the same effect as prayer when the going gets rough. There's a value in laughing, right? Maybe not laughing to off-color jokes, but laughing is definitely a value. Does the quality of having a sense of humor ever find a mention in our ancient scriptures? Do the Vedas or Vedanta ever teach anything about laughter? Not directly. Indirectly, how about this? In traditional Advaita Vedanta, there's a lot of emphasis put on the value of titiksha. Titiksha gets translated poorly as endurance, and I don't think that's a very good translation. Titiksha means the ability to put up with miserable situations without being drawn into the misery, and maybe even laughing at them. To laugh at miserable situations is a value, because you're not getting pulled down into that misery. This is a value called titiksha. Forbearance, perhaps, is a better translation. Tolerance. But I would take it a step further. The ability to laugh at bad situations. When I say laugh at a bad, I don't think I've ever told this anecdote. In the 1980s, my first visit to India, I'm traveling with an American friend, and we go to some hotel someplace, and we're staying there, and they serve us food in the evening, and it's not a very clean place. So in the rice, we can count how many cockroaches are in the rice. Honestly. I mean, it happens. It happens. Anyway, we broke out into laughter. It was so impossibly and ridiculously bad. We couldn't eat anything, but we could certainly laugh about how ridiculous the situation was. So tell me, if we get angry or upset, what good does that do? We only get more miserable if we're angry and upset. And do you think the cooks can do any better? Their rice has cockroaches in it. What can they do? They're not going to pick them out. In fact, if they pick them out, that's even worse, because then you eat the rice thinking it's okay. So anyway, laughing laughing itself is not a quality, but being able to laugh at, being able to take miserable situations with a sense of lightness is certainly a great quality, wonderful quality. Next, Amit, who lives in India. Ishvara has always existed eternally and in parallel with Brahman, Nirguna Brahman. Ishvara too has had cycles of manifestation and unmanifestation. That statement is not correct. The world goes through cycles of being manifest and unmanifest, not Ishvara. The world is manifest now. The world will become unmanifest in the future. Ishvara does not undergo conditions of manifestation and unmanifestation. But that's a wrong assumption on the part of Amit. But his question is, can Brahman exist without Ishvara? Think that when you put it in those words, it looks really confusing. Can Brahman exist without Ishvara? So metaphorically, can clay exist without a pot? The existence of clay without a pot is just an idea. It's not an experience. This is a technical answer to what really is a very technical question. The technical question is, in fact, I think we had it in our earlier satsang, can there be Nirguna Brahman without Saguna Brahman? Like, can there be Brahman without Ishvara? Can there be clay without pot? This is a very deep philosophical question. If we're going to answer it according to our experience, which is important, because we're not talking about philosophy now. A philosopher, in fact, Plato, the famous philosopher from ancient Greek, he would say, absolutely, you have clay as an idea that exists differently from pot as an idea. Well, ideas belong to the realm of philosophy. We don't care about philosophy here, honestly. We care about experience. So from the standpoint of experience, let's revisit this question. Can you experience clay without any form at all? So even if it's in a lump, even if it's dissolved in water, whatever it is, it still has some form. From the standpoint of experience, clay only exists with form, from the standpoint of experience. From the standpoint of experience, which is our human condition, Ishvara and Brahman always exist together. There is no Brahman, there is no Nirguna Brahman without Ishvara. from the standpoint of human experience. Now, if you want to get into a philosophical dissection of that issue, fine. But that philosophical dissection is not Vedanta. As we said before, Vedanta is not a philosophy. Vedanta is a method of self-inquiry, and methods of self-inquiry are focused on human experience. All of Vedanta is focused on human experience, and from the level of experience, there's no clay can't be experienced without pot. There is no Nirguna Brahman without Ishvara, from the standpoint of experience. Okay. This question is from Pramod, who lives in Gurugram, Haryana. That's part of Delhi, or next to New Delhi, Gurugram. Gurgaon, they used to call it. Nice that all the names are being Sanskritized, and I actually like that. Gurugram, the city of the gurus. Well, nice. I live in the town of the gurus. Good. This question's from Pramod. Is awareness a thought? No. Awareness is that because of which you know the presence or absence of a thought. If yes, does this change? How does it, well, if yes, well, not yes, so we'll skip the second part of his question. So awareness, and in Vedanta we use the words awareness and consciousness as synonyms. Chit, Chaitanya, awareness, consciousness, we don't make no shade of difference among all these words. They all mean the same thing. And consciousness or awareness is that by which all mental events are known. Whatever is happening in your mind right now, all of those thoughts, perceptions, if there are any emotions, all of that is known due to awareness. The awareness which is your essential nature. In essence, you are a conscious being who is aware of whatever is happening in your mind. Awareness is present, and he's got several other parts of the question. Pramod continues. Awareness is present in waking and dream state. Assuming that it's absent in deep sleep, wait a minute. Why should we assume that consciousness is absent in deep sleep? We said awareness is that by which you know thoughts, emotions, and sensations. Suppose there are no thoughts, emotions, or sensations, then don't you still have consciousness? Look at, we'll turn this into an equation. Awareness is aware of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. I'm making up an equation. Suppose we subtract thoughts, emotions, and sensations. What happened to consciousness? It's still there. We've only subtracted the known, but the knower remains. This is one of the real central teachings of Advaita Vedanta, and that is consciousness doesn't blink on and off. I've given the example. The light bulb in your refrigerator blinks on and off. Consciousness is like a light bulb in your refrigerator? In American English, we say, give me a break. Nice American idiom. So, no, consciousness doesn't go away in deep sleep. In deep sleep, you are, and this is a little counterintuitive, in deep sleep, you are as awareful as you are right now, but there's nothing to be observed. It would be like standing in a dark room. Standing in a dark room, what do you see? Nothing. Do you see nothing because you're blind? In that dark room, you have the power of sight. You see. There's nothing to be seen. That describes deep sleep. What is the relationship between awareness, chidabhasa, and knowingness? Same. Absolutely the same. Can meditation be on awareness? Can you meditate on awareness? Awareness is not a thought. Awareness is not an emotion. Awareness is not a sensation. You can meditate on thoughts, emotions, sensations. You can meditate on nothing, but you can't meditate on awareness, because awareness belongs to the meditator. Awareness is not an object on which you can meditate. Let me say that one more time. Awareness belongs to the meditator. Awareness is not an object in your mind that you can meditate on. Next question is from Michael. Michael says, when I see a name or form, and I label it, person, friend, shared, it seems that those names and forms come with subtle imagery, beliefs, narratives, memories. These subtle overlays can be distracting, painful, or sometimes enjoyable. With this in mind, it seems that from a mithya perspective, there is more to the, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, more to the world than name and form. I'm curious if Vedanta discusses this. Okay. Yes, absolutely. There's more to the world than name and form. Sitting in this chair is a form dressed in orange who has a name, Swami Tadatmananda. Is that all that when you see me, is that it? Or does that name and form come with it a whole variety of thoughts? You've heard me teaching for a long time. Perhaps you've formed some opinions about me. Some good opinions, I hope. Maybe some bad opinions. That's up to you. I have no control over that. Anyway, you have opinions about me. Do those opinions belong to this name and form? Suppose you have a good opinion of me. Fine. Do those good opinions belong to this name and form sitting in this chair? The opinions belong to you. All of name and form is all you get, all you see. Everything else is what you bring to the experience. And we bring a lot to every experience. What we bring to an experience, there's an American metaphor, baggage. And we bring our baggage to that experience. And baggage is usually used with a negative connotation. For example, if the one you see sitting in this chair is not me, but someone you really dislike, you see this name and form of the person you dislike, but then what comes is all your baggage, all the emotional stuff associated with your dislike for that person. So we differentiate then in the world between an objective reality and a subjective reality. So this is a Vedantic analysis here. Objective reality is namarupa, name and form. That's it. But then there's this whole subjective reality, your opinion about me, or your feelings about that person you really dislike. That's a subjective reality. The objective reality of nama rupa belongs to the world. The subjective reality is projected by you. The objective reality is part of Ishvara's creation. The subjective reality is created by whom? Created by you. Your opinion of me, your feelings about that person you don't like. So we make this distinction. The objective world is created by Ishvara. We actually have a fancy Sanskrit name for it. We call it Vyavaharika Satta. But then there's a second reality, Michael uses a nice term. He calls it an overlay, subtle overlay. That's an accurate way of putting it. We would say it is a subjective reality created by you, not created by Ishvara. It is your private creation. It belongs to you. In fact, it stays inside of you. It is your creation, and we have a different name for it. We call that pratibhasika satta, projected reality. So we make a distinction between empirical reality, vyavaharika satta, name and form, which is different from projected reality of the pratibhasika satya, your opinions, your thoughts, your baggage, your overlay, as you said. Okay, next. You have other questions here? Yeah, I'm going to take the microphone here.
Just addressing what you just said just now, would it be correct to say that subjective opinion are all based on raga and dvesha? Would that be a correct interpretation?
Probably.
So, okay. Just wanted to understand that a little bit. Okay. Thank you.
Namaste. On that note of name and form, can we not say that something like an opinion can be classified as having a form that is subtle and of a different order than what we perceive with our senses?
Sure.
So would that
mental
not
form. But our discussion here is to distinguish realities, empirical reality versus subjective reality. So your opinion is a subjective reality. You created it.
based on our projection?
Got it.
Understood.
Okay. One more question here.
So, you know how you said objectively it's like Ishvara doesn't have it's subjective, right? You said, but doesn't like the way you view someone or that also comes from Ishvara, right? In the sense that, well, who's the one that why would one person process something differently than the other person?
Because they're different,
right, but
different minds, different personalities.
which comes from Ishvara, though, correct? No.
Everything comes from Ishvara,
Right.
but it's not Ishvara. Yeah, everything comes from Ishvara, but don't mix the two levels. If you're going to talk about Ishvara, we'll talk about Ishvara. If you want to talk about individual people, we'll talk about individual people. So different people have different personalities, different opinions. I'm going to say those people exist because of Ishvara, but the different opinions don't belong to Ishvara.
Okay.
The different opinions belong to the individual people. We make opinions. The basic opinion we all have, good, bad. Ridiculous. There's no such thing as good and bad. Good means I like it. Bad means I don't like it. But we all have these opinions, good and bad. I like it, I don't like it. Ishvara doesn't have opinions like that. Ishvara is not a human being with such opinions. Okay? All right. Let's continue here. This question is from Om Prakash, who lives in Texas. Om asks, you said, I am the knower of what's going on in my mind. Correct. But isn't it true that the mind knows the contents of consciousness? The mind knows the contents of consciousness. I'm confused about this. I am too. I've never used the expression content of consciousness. I have used the term content of a thought, and maybe Om has turned these words around. What I have, and I think this is what's happened. I have said, and I frequently say, the content of a thought is consciousness. Not that consciousness is not the content of something. Here's the metaphor. Is this pot is made of, how many times are we using this pot? You see why I keep it right here? Handy. All right. So this pot is made of clay. Thoughts are made of what? A simple way of understanding is just as a pot is made of clay, thoughts are made of consciousness. So we can say that the content of this pot is clay, we can say that the content of every thought is consciousness. And because consciousness is you, and because the thought is present in your consciousness, like pot is present in clay, thoughts are present in consciousness, therefore those thoughts are known to you. So the mind knows, not the mind knows the contents of consciousness, the mind knows thoughts. And the content of every thought is consciousness. I'll say that one more time. The mind, no, not even the mind knows thoughts. What is mind knows? What can your mind know without consciousness? Mind minus consciousness is what? Doesn't exist, doesn't have any meaning. Your mind doesn't know anything. What is mind? The simplest definition, mind is thoughts plus emotions plus perceptions, anything else going on. Mind refers to all your mental activities. All these mental activities are known to consciousness. Consciousness knows the mind. Mind doesn't know anything. Our minds, in spite of all of our learning, our minds are dumb, stupid. What makes us conscious beings, what makes us sentient beings, is consciousness. All right. How are we doing with questions here? Good. Okay. Question from Mickey. Doesn't say where Mickey lives. I've heard you say that the purpose of shravana is to gain self-knowledge, and the purpose of nidhidhyasana is to remove old habitual patterns of thinking. Correct. So the practice in Vedanta is shravana, which is a practice of atma-vichara, self-inquiry guided by the teachings of Vedanta, manana, a process of removing doubts and vagueness, and finally, nidhidhyasana, Vedanta contemplation, a process of removing habitual identification with body and mind. If someone has recognized their true nature through shravana, self-inquiry guided by these teachings, but still has old habitual patterns in the mind, can they or should they stop shravana and just focus on nidhidhyasana? I think it was in the last class, we said these teachings are not linear. It's not like cooking baking a cake. So there must be so many steps in baking a cake. Step 1, step 2, step 3. This is not like baking a cake. So all three of these, shravana, manana, nidhidhyasana, overlap completely. We separate them more for the sake of clarity of understanding, because they have different purposes. Shravana, manana, and nidhidhyasana are one Vedanta. But if we use that one Vedanta for the sake of self-inquiry, let's call that Vedanta shravana, that practice. If we are using Vedanta for the sake of removing doubts, it's the same Vedanta. But now we call it manana because we're using these teachings for the sake of removing doubts. And then finally, if we're using these teachings to remove habitual identification of the body and mind, it is nidhidhyasana, one teaching that supports three kinds of practice. And we say that the emphasis of our practice will depend on where we are in our spiritual journeys. That can shift. Early on, the emphasis is on shravana. Later, the emphasis can be on manana and nidhidhyasana. Doesn't mean shravana stops, but it's just a shift of emphasis. Okay, one last question here. This question is from Sanjay. Or I should pronounce it, he's from Dhaka, Bangladesh. So I'm practicing my Bengali accent. Sanjay. How's that? I love Bengalis, and I love Bengali culture. You know that I love Rabindranath Tagore, so Sanjoy. So, and I'm not making fun of anyone. I enjoy this culture, and I like hearing that accent. So, Sanjay asks, my question is there any chance Arsha Bodha will have a branch in Dhaka, Bangladesh? I want to be part of Arsha Bodha, but to be part of Dhaka only is possible for me. Please help us living in Bangladesh. We don't have any branches. Actually, there is an Arsha Bodha branch in Dhaka on your computer or phone or whatever you're using. There's no physical presence. Our physical presence is only here in New Jersey, in the United States, not anywhere else. But your question leads me to a concern. I understand that there is a sizable Hindu community that has remained in Bangladesh after India's war. Was it 73? 71, thank you. So in 1971, Bangladesh fought for its independence. It was still part of Pakistan at that time. And India participated in that war and was very helpful in winning Bangladesh's independence from Pakistan. There were a lot of ethnic issues, and there continue to be a lot of ethnic issues in Bangladesh. And I understand that following the war, many of the Hindus who were in Bangladesh left. In fact, even during the war, they were leaving and coming as refugees into India, largely into Bengal, not only, but largely into Bengal. But it was a tough time. I mean, I've read accounts of the war, even though it was fairly brief. It was. I guess I can say this: Pakistan's treatment of Bangladeshis was really horrible. I mean, just terrible things happened during that war. So anyway, many Hindu Bangladeshis left and found refuge in India, but many remained, and I guess over the years they've continued to drift over the border, but there's still a sizable number of Hindus in Bangladesh. I think it's a small percentage of the population. But I've come to understand that there's a considerable amount of discrimination against Hindus and perhaps Christians in Bangladesh, like in other Islamic countries, in Pakistan, sadly. Sorry, I'm kind of beating up on Pakistan. I must be in a political mood. Pakistani Muslims discriminate against Ahmadiyya Muslims. What is that? They're all Muslims. For one group of Muslims to discriminate and violently discriminate against these Ahmadiyyas. What to speak of discriminating against Christians and Hindus and others. Anyway, this discrimination is a big problem, not just in Pakistan, but in Bangladesh. And Sanjay, if I just allow me to address you. If you are subject to this kind of discrimination, please write me an email and tell me what's going on. I presume that Dhaka is a fairly cosmopolitan place, and I would hope that discrimination is less in such a place, but I might be wrong, and I would like to know. So please, if that is the case, please send me an email. And this would perhaps be a good place to conclude our satsang today. Thank you all for coming. And you can send me your questions by email. Please write satsang question in the subject line. That'll be very helpful. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschad Dukkha Bhag Bhaveta Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Good. See you next time.